In October 2023, an Australian cattle farmer in his mid-60s, Colin Devereux, was working on a fence on his ranch when he noticed some fish jumping around in the center of a small muddy pond. He decided to go check out what was going on when a 10-foot crocodile made the worst mistake of its life. Colin later said, "The water had receded and it was down to this dirty water in the middle. I took 2 steps and the dirty bastard latched onto my right foot." The crocodile dragged Colin into the water, but Colin fought back, kicking the croc in its ribs and trying to push it off, but it did nothing. The crocodile tossed him around like a rag doll. Then, as Colin put it, "I managed to have a bite." Colin sank his teeth into the croc's eyelid. He said it felt like biting into leather. Upon feeling the pain of Colin's powerful bite, the croc realized who was really in charge. Clearly outmatched, the croc released Colin. Colin ran up the hill with the flesh on his right leg open to the bone and the croc chasing him. Colin made it to the truck and soaked up the blood with a towel and tied a rope around his leg to cut off the circulation. His brother drove him to the hospital 80 miles away, where they cleaned mud and animal feces out of his wounds for 10 straight days. In the end, that croc learned a valuable lesson in attacking a northern Australian farmer, and Colin Devereux laughed in the face of death. In May 2023, 51-year-old Marcus McGowan was snorkeling at a remote vacation resort in northern Queensland. He was with a relatively large group, about 40 kilometers off the coast of the Charles Hardy Islands, in an area known to the locals as Croc Country. Shortly after jumping into the water, Marcus felt powerful jaws latch onto his head and giant teeth pierce his scalp. The first thing that came to mind was a shark. He immediately reached up and felt the leathery skin and knew it was a saltwater crocodile. He struggled with the animal and was able to get his fingers inside its jaws and pulled as hard as he could. Luckily for Marcus, this was a juvenile croc. At only approximately 6 to 8 feet long, Marcus was able to pry its jaws open just enough to get his head out. But the croc wasn't finished. It rushed him again, coming back for more. Marcus was able to fend off the beast with only his hand receiving damage this time. The croc relented and swam away. Marcus was transported to Cairns Hospital, where he received treatment for head and hand lacerations and puncture wounds. Marcus was extremely lucky that this was a juvenile croc and not an adult. Crocodiles have the strongest bite on the planet, and Marcus would not have been able to open its jaws if it had been fully grown. On September 21, 2016, a 34-year-old Houston man, Jonathan Shoneman, was living and working in Cancun, Mexico as a fisherman and a scuba instructor. He had some time off and it was a beautiful day, so he decided to partake in one of his favorite pastimes, spearfishing. He went out to his favorite spot and began snorkeling when out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of something huge in the water. But he knew exactly what it was, because he had been swimming this area since he was 4 years old, and he had seen this exact crocodile many times before. "I've been seeing it for years," he said, "years and years, and it never bothered me before." After Jonathan caught a fleeting glimpse of the crocodile, everything immediately went black as the crocodile's giant jaws crashed down on its unsuspecting victim's head. Jonathan was fighting for his life. As the croc clamped down harder and harder, he could hear bones breaking. He said, "I just got this hand and kept punching it inside the mouth. And then, with this hand, I was hooking his eyes. I could hear my bones cracking, just cracking all the time." As the animal was crushing Jonathan's skull, he managed to grab a tree branch and began hitting the croc with it, when eventually it let him go and swam away. Jonathan's friend rushed him to the hospital, where the doctors saved his life. Luckily, he made a full recovery. Kakadu National Park is the second largest national park in Australia, covering an area of 19,804 square kilometers. Most of the region is owned by the native Aboriginal traditional owners that have lived on this land for more than 60,000 years. It is a highly protected land with regulated park passes for visitors. Guided and unguided tours are allowed. But visitors beware. It is Northern Territory, Australia, and the dangers are plenty. This is where the world-renowned feminist Val Plumwood was visiting in 1985. She was a highly respected environmental philosopher from New South Wales who loved adventures in nature. Kakadu National Park was the perfect place for her to get out and explore the environment. She was very familiar with the park. Years earlier, as an activist, she had fought to secure its status as a national park. Now, Plumwood was camped at the East Alligator Ranger Station. She was there to assist Greg Miles in mapping out a new hiking trail through the park. As she was a very experienced long-distance bushwalker, she could judge the beauty and the difficulty of the trail. So she set out from the ranger station to find the trailhead along a tributary of the East Alligator River. First, she would canoe through the swamp to the tributary and find the trailhead where the hike would begin. At this time, the crocodile population was growing, since hunting them had been banned a decade earlier. However, it was still common practice to canoe along the rivers, as it was thought to be relatively safe and that crocodiles generally would not attack canoes. As Plumwood loaded up the canoe and began paddling away, a light rain began to fall. Little did she know that the rain had been consistent up the river, and the trailhead that she was heading out to find was no longer visible. As Plumwood paddled up the river, the rain came down in droves, reducing visibility and making the experience downright miserable. She kept paddling along, looking for a rock outcrop that marked the trailhead, but through the blinding rain and the rising river, she couldn't find it. She stopped below a rock ledge and looked every which way to make sure that the coast was clear. Once she was confident that there were no hidden dangers lurking, she got out of the canoe and took shelter under the rock where she ate her soaked lunch. As she sat eating her lunch, she got the unmistakable feeling that she was being watched. But she wasn't about to give up yet. She wanted to explore a clear, deep channel that she had briefly traveled along the day before, so she loaded back up and headed back out into the rain in her small fiberglass canoe. She paddled through the channel, stopping occasionally to dump her canoe, but not before intently searching for small eyes breaching the surface. Eventually, the channel ended at a sandbar. The rain had also let up, so she could see now. She scanned the water with a feeling of intense anxiety. After she decided that everything was clear, she pulled the canoe across the sandbar. Her heart dropped when she saw the other side. What she thought was going to be the tributary leading back to the East Alligator Station was instead the dark waters of the main Alligator River. She recalled the ranger's warnings: stay away from the main Alligator River. The current is too strong, and if you get swept out of your canoe, the crocodiles are waiting. Now she knew that she was standing directly in one of the most dangerous places in Australia, on the banks of the Alligator River. She scanned again for danger, and again saw none. She slowly pulled her canoe across the sandbar and made it back to the tributary. She was back in the canoe and now was dead set on returning to her camp. Just as she began to feel a sense of relief, the rain and wind picked up again. She had no choice but to continue on. After no more than 5 to 10 minutes, she rounded a bend on her way back to camp when she saw a stick stretched across the water that had not been there when she crossed earlier. The current pushed her closer, and as she came closer to it, it became clear that it was not a stick, but a crocodile. At first, it didn't seem threatening at all. It was casually flowing through the water, same as her. She paddled away from the giant just to be sure, but the more she tried to paddle away, the closer they became. Their paths converged. It was a surprise to Plumwood when the crocodile struck. She was not only surprised by the attack, she had been told that crocs don't attack canoes, but she was also surprised by the pure power of the attack. The flimsy canoe felt as if it was going to break apart. The crocodile hit the canoe over and over, and she knew that she was now prey. If the canoe capsized in the river, she was surely dead. She had to get to shore, so she paddled as hard as she could. However, as she got closer to the bank, she realized that it was steep and muddy. She thought there was no way to climb up it before the croc would grab her. But just before the bank was a paper bark tree. At the last second, she decided to jump into the tree and climb to safety, but as she stood up, the croc moved along the side of the boat, staring straight up at her. She shouted, "Go away," at the croc as it just waited, staring at her. She went for it and jumped for the tree. Before she even touched a piece of the tree, she was in the croc's powerful jaws and pulled straight under into the dark, muddy water. Few of those who have experienced the crocodile's death roll have lived to describe it. It is, essentially, an experience beyond words of total terror. The crocodile's breathing and heart metabolism are not suited to prolonged struggle, so the roll is an intense burst of power designed to overcome the victim's resistance quickly. The crocodile then holds the feeble, struggling prey underwater until it drowns. The roll was a centrifuge of boiling blackness that lasted for an eternity, beyond endurance. But when I seemed all but finished, the rolling suddenly stopped. My feet touched bottom, my head broke the surface, and, coughing, I sucked at air. amazed to be alive. The crocodile still had me in its pincer grip between the legs. I had just begun to weep for the prospects of my mangled body when the crocodile pitched me suddenly into a second death roll. When the second death roll stopped, she again attempted to pull herself into the tree, but the crocodile still had a grip and began growling as if in anger as it released her. She moved to the back of the tree and leapt again for the branch, but again the croc grabbed her and plunged her under for another roll. After the third, she was exhausted, but so was the crocodile. She reached back and felt the croc's head behind her, with its jaws latched onto her thigh. She found 2 lumps, slid her fingers inside 2 holes thinking it was the croc's eyes, but it wasn't. It must have been the ears or the nose, but it didn't matter because the croc didn't so much as flinch. She felt the croc release the grip and she pulled herself free once again. She had already tried to escape by the tree multiple times, and it didn't work, so this time she dove for the bank and managed to pull herself up, only to slide right back down toward the crocodile's jaws. She grabbed onto a tuft of grass on the bank, resting, waiting for the croc to come up and get her, when the grass let loose and again she began sliding down to the waiting jaws of the crocodile. She flailed her arms and grabbed at anything that she could. When her fingers penetrated the mud and stuck, she could support herself. She slammed her other hand into the mud. Again, her fingers stuck, and she pulled herself up, over and over, slamming her fingers into the mud until she reached the top. She made it. After putting some distance between her and the crocodile, she finally evaluated her situation. She was miles from camp, and her leg was torn to pieces. She tore up her clothes and made a tourniquet for her thigh and began the long trek back. Fortunately, she was an excellent navigator, so she was able to head in the right direction. But she knew in the back of her mind that she had crossed the swamp above the ranger station in her canoe, and there was no way to make it back without it. She pushed through the wind and the rain and pain in her leg and pelvis. She came to the swamp where she couldn't cross. She would have to wait for a search party, but knew where she was, they wouldn't locate her. Her best bet was a low area at the edge of the swamp near camp, but it was 2 miles away. She staggered on. She came across a flooded tributary and had to go far out of her way. After several hours, she began blacking out periodically, but finally made it to the edge of the swamp, where she possibly could be found. She laid down. Most likely a rescue party wouldn't come until morning, and she knew that she would be dead by then. Darkness fell, and the rain stopped. She could hear dingoes howling and mosquitoes buzzed all around her body. Crocodiles splashed in the nearby swamp. Then she heard a motor. It sounded like a boat. She called for help and waved, but the motor carried on and faded into the darkness. Hope was all but lost. She just laid there, waiting to die. Then a rescue boat appeared on the swamp, heading in her direction. The earlier motor had been the ranger checking for her at camp, and he had heard her cries for help. She was alive, and she was transported to the Darwin Hospital, where she recovered. She overheard talks of a revenge killing of hunters heading upstream to locate and kill the crocodile. She squashed this immediately. She had invaded the crocodile's territory, not the other way around. There would be no revenge on this crocodile for simply being a crocodile. In 1987, a 23-foot rescue boat was traveling down the Prince Regent River in Western Australia. The boat was transporting a body from the King's Cascade waterfall to the regional police station at Broome. Approximately 9 miles into their journey, a saltwater crocodile leapt 4 feet out of the water, grabbing the body bag that was positioned at the bow of the small boat. The crocodile caught the edge of the bag, tearing a hole in it before sliding back down under the water. The crew of the boat were so concerned that another attack would occur that they turned back. They anchored the boat at St. George Basin and called for a bigger boat. A larger Customs Department ship later transported the remains to the Broome office. The crew of the rescue boat were so concerned because not only was the bag attacked on the boat, but the person in the bag had been attacked earlier that day by a 4-meter crocodile. The body in the bag was that of Ginger Faye Meadows. Ginger Meadows was a 24-year-old model from Colorado who had recently separated from her husband. She was discontented with her marriage and her life in general. She wanted more out of life, and when she saw the captivating movie Crocodile Dundee in 1986, she decided that traveling and adventure was going to be her escape and fulfillment. So, in 1987, she traveled to Australia to fulfill these dreams of adventure. She arrived in Australia taking a job aboard the luxury yacht the Lady G with her chef friend Jane Burchett. The yacht sailed to the beautiful King's Cascade in Western Australia. These falls bring in thousands of tourists every year and are extremely well known as a destination in Western Australia. The captain dropped anchor away from the falls, and the captain and members of the crew, including Jane and Ginger, took a skiff to the falls. The captain, Bruce Fitzpatrick, knew the dangers of the waters below the falls and told the crew members not to go in the water. He later stated that he specifically told them to not so much as dangle a foot in the water. They reached the shore, and the captain and members of the crew began climbing the rocks next to the falls. Ginger and Jane stayed behind. However, soon Ginger and Jane decided that the water looked safe enough and entered below the falls, wading into the water on a ledge about waist deep. This is where they stood when the captain noticed a saltwater crocodile heading straight for them. He called out for them, but it was too late. Before they could move, their backs were against the wall and they were staring straight into the eyes of a 4-meter-long saltwater crocodile with its mouth open, ready to attack. Ginger clutched Jane's arm and they all hesitated for a moment. Then Jane took off her shoe and threw it at the crocodile. The shoe hit the crocodile in the head and got a slight reaction. The croc closed its mouth and submerged. Jane was just about to say, "I don't know, but let's stay here," when Ginger released her grip on Jane's arm and dove into the water towards an opening on shore. Unfortunately, Ginger didn't make it far. The crocodile's huge jaws clamped down around Ginger's waist and immediately drug her underwater. The crocodile then re-emerged directly in front of Jane, as if to show Jane its catch. Ginger looked up directly into Jane's eyes, just before the crocodile again submerged, pulling Ginger under. The crew retrieved Jane with the skiff and they went back to the Lady G. The retrieval boat arrived a short time later and retrieved Ginger's remains from a nearby mangrove and placed her body in the body bag that would later be attacked again on the way to Broome. This is True Mysteries. Please like, leave comments, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.